Now let's take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. We start the news today on the foreign scene as the ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores will appear before a federal judge today. A spokesperson for the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of New York confirmed yesterday, Sunday. The spokesperson told CBS News that Maduro and Flores are scheduled to appear in federal court at 12 noon. It will be their first court appearance on criminal charges since they were extracted from Venezuela during the U.S. military operation in Caracas on Saturday. Maduro and Flores arrived in New York on Saturday afternoon, hours after they were taken from their home and transported to the USS Iwo Jima warship before being flown to New York to face criminal charges. MDC is one of the few detention centers in the U.S. with the capacity for high-security defendants. It is known for housing other high-profile defendants like Luigi Mangione, Sean Diddy Combs, and Ghislaine Maxwell. In other news, here in Nigeria, Chairman Nigeria Revenue Service, NRS, Dr. Zak Adedeji, yesterday said there was no controversy over the implementation of the new tax laws, adding that their passage followed due process after adequate consultation. He said the NRS was more interested in the Gazetted tax laws rather than the alleged controversies surrounding the harmonized version by the National Assembly, which he said related to the internal workings of the legislative arm. The NRS boss also clarified that, contrary to speculation, the law became operational from June 29, 2025, when President Bola Tinubu signed the bills into law, and not January 1, 2026, as currently being touted. However, he explained that actual implementation of some of the laws was extended till January to allow taxpayers, including companies, as well as the NRS, to prepare and adjust to the new reality. Further commenting on the objectives of the tax reforms, Adedeji said the move was primarily taken to protect the poor as well as grow the economy. In other news, the National Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Senator Ajibola Bashir, has warned the National Vice Chairman, South of the party, Victor Giadom, to stop disrespecting the Governor of Rivers State, Siminalayi Fubara, to please the Minister of Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. Giadom had, while speaking last Tuesday during Wike's thank you visit to the people of Gokana local government area of Rivers State, quoted to have said, and in his words, to the so-called governor of Rivers State, to win anything in this state, you must go through Wike. End of quote. Reacting, Bashir said it was unfortunate that a member of the National Working Committee of the party was referring to a governor in the party as a so-called governor of Rivers State. He added that even if the governor was not a member of the ruling party, Giadom could not refer to an elected governor as a so-called governor in order to please anybody. Now moving on, despite its transition into a commercial entity, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited is grappling with mounting financial pressure as unviable and underperforming subsidiaries deepen intercompany indebtedness, pushing outstanding obligations owed to the company to 30.30 trillion naira. Latest findings from NNPC's 2024 audited financial statements showed that debts owed by subsidiaries, joint ventures, and other related entities rose by 70.4% or 12.52 trillion naira from 17.78 trillion naira in 2023 to 30.30 trillion naira as of December 31, 2024. The sharp increase has raised fresh concerns about the company's liquidity management and long-term financial sustainability. An analysis of the audited accounts recently released by the oil firm conducted on Sunday revealed that several of the national oil company's core operating subsidiaries, particularly its refineries, trading arms, and gas infrastructure units, accounted for the bulk of the ballooning intercompany receivables. The report showed that while the national oil company operates 32 subsidiaries, only 8 are not indebted to the parent company, leaving the majority burdened with varying levels of intercompany debt. Moving on, in response to the attack on Kasuwan Daji community in Niger State, President Tinubu has instructed the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Service Chiefs, and the Inspector General of Police, and the Director General of the DSS to track down those responsible, bring them to justice, and rescue all abducted victims. The orders contained in a statement by the President's Special Advisor on Information and Strategy, Bayo Ononuga, following the killing of villagers and the abduction of women and children by terrorists suspected to be fleeing from Sokoto and Zamfara states at a United States airstrike on Christmas Eve. President Tinubu, who is currently abroad, strongly condemned the attack, saying the assailants have tested the resolve of Nigeria and its people and stressed that they, along with anyone who aided or enabled them, must face the full consequences of their action. Meanwhile, troops of the Joint Task Force, supported by the air component of Operation Fansanyama, have neutralized no fewer than 23 bandits fleeing Kano State following coordinated attacks on Shanono and Shayanwa local government areas. A statement issued by the Assistant Director, Army Public Relations, 3 Brigade, Nigerian Army, Captain Zubairu Babatunde, said the bandits launched the attacks on the night of Thursday, extending into the early hours of Friday. He said ground troops successfully contained the attacks and inflicted heavy casualties on the assailants before tracking the fleeing bandits to Karadua village in Matazu local government area of neighboring Katsina State. According to him, intelligence reports revealed that the bandits had gathered at Danmarke in Matazu local government area to bury some of their members killed during the encounter with troops. He added that the operation, supported by aerial intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance (ISR) missions, also led to the destruction of several weapons and equipment belonging to the bandits. All right, a lot before us this morning, Dr. Bati Rufai. Of course, the tax interview, the tax conversation with the chief taxman in Nigeria, Dr. Adedeji by Dr. Bati, was a very in-depth and expository conversation. Also had the opportunity to debunk and respond to some of the main things that have come up with regards to doubts around the new tax law, which is now in implementation. And of course, the unfortunate incident in Niger State, then followed, of course, by the good news around some of the efforts by the military. The first news that's making headlines across the world. Of course, everyone is talking about Trump and Venezuela, but a number of things to get through. Rufai, please touch on some of them.
Let me talk about the tax because the facts are now clear.
Yeah.
That was altered. The Gazetted Act was altered, pure and simple. So whatever Zach Adedeji says, he says it for himself. Yeah, he'll speak for government. But what the National Assembly has now released, Section 29, for instance, National Assembly version provided annual returns with reporting threshold of monthly cumulative 50 million for individuals to 50 million for companies. The altered Gazetted Act replaces this with quarterly returns at significantly lower thresholds of 25 and 100 million. As a check by Daily. And for further reading, you can go to Daily Trust. Section 29, 3 and 4, the Empower Tax Authority to demand without notice was entirely removed. The CTZ retained the original version, which states that the demand of information by tax authority must be done by notice. There were a lot of sections there, and it just shows it was all that. So I think we've been able to rest this matter. For Mr. Zach Adedeji, yes, he's going to push his tax bill, the altered tax bill. Can I use the word the forged Gazetted tax bill now? Because there's no discrepancy about processes. What you do in the National Assembly is supposed to correlate to what the President signed and what is gazetted. The National Assembly is supposed to be the last filter layer. So whoever added all of this, changing things like parameters from 50 million to 25 million, thereabouts, that's a real policy shift. So, and also, this also negates the narrative of the President that whatever was altered is not enough to shift. No, it's enough to shift everything. And kudos. I think the real patrons this morning are the likes of Dansuki that brought this out. And I don't know, wherever that man is this morning, he's a real patriot, he deserves his flowers. And the other people too that equally stood firm. For further reading, go and see all the alterations that went on. Read the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. I think we've settled that. The bill was altered. The question we should now ask is, what is not altered in this country? How many bills have been altered like that? Is that not the way people alter election results? Is it today? Have you not seen a case where what people say they hear in court when they give a judgment is different from when the citizens come out? It's a country of a lot of alterations. So we keep deceiving ourselves. The question we should investigate more. what more of these bills have been altered after the National Assembly agree on something, when it's gazetted, something else is gazetted. So the forgery scandal will be on this administration. As regards Nicolas Maduro, I'm sorry, but why are we surprised? America has always done this. Kissinger was master-in-chief for this. In fact, for good measure, I think it was in 1973 when they gave Kissinger a Nobel Prize for disrupting the world, for aiding the Pakistanis to kill a lot of the Bangladeshis in their independence struggle, the case in Laos, the case in Vietnam, and all of that. In fact, 2 members of the Nobel Committee rebelled against that. We all know how America toppled the government of Salvador Allende. Why did they go to Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela? It's because of oil. Venezuela has one of the biggest reserves of heavy oil, heavy crude in the world. 304, I think is 1 billion barrels in reserves, bigger than Saudi Arabia. And all this while, the Americans have been running the show. Prior to 1999, when the likes of Hugo Chavez came in, ExxonMobil take about over 80% of the profits. Hugo Chavez came in with his Chavismo revolution and passed it on with Venezuela, and he nationalized the oil company, and America didn't like it. So America feels that they owe a right to the oil, the oil wealth there. Just like how they think they owe a right to Cuba, because Cuba was where they were doing all their shenanigans and their production. Americans pretty much ran Cuba until you had the likes of Fidel Castro come upend that. So it's the Monroe Doctrine once again. They've told Europe, you can owe yours fair, but here we'll take it over. And they will say drug charges. At first they were saying Maduro was shipping fentanyl. It turns out now, what are they charging him for? Cocaine. So they will bring up chopped-up charges. And you see, European leaders, because they are subservient to America, have no spine. I think Laura Kissinger was interviewing Keir Starmer the other day, and she was asking him, you people are condemning Putin. What about the moral right to be able to condemn Trump about the invasion of Venezuela? He was ducking around the question. So it's not new. It's all for oil. It's all for petrodollar. And that's the game America plays. The hypocrisy is on all of us that can't call it. Yes, some people are jubilating Venezuela because of the high-handedness of Maduro regime, which is only certain and all of that. But you see, the truth is, some people are also protesting against the high-handedness and authoritarian regime of Trump. So it's a new world order. Other nations could keep fooling around and ducking around America while they keep doing all of this. The difference between Trump and other American leaders, he's just doing this openly. There was an American president when Kissinger was doing all he was doing against Salvador Allende in Chile.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr.
Okay, first, I was the one who conducted the interview with the chairman of the Nigeria Revenue Service. And before I conducted that interview, I had seen the release of the certified true copies by the National Assembly. The Director of Information, and also, I think, Akinrutimi, speaking for the House of Reps. And I went through the ordeal of comparing the official Gazette, which I had, with the certified true copies released by the National Assembly. And what I saw was that there was no difference. Whoever has had access to the certified true copies should look at the relevant sections, and you will see that there were no discrepancies, which was the point that was maintained in my conversation with Dr. Zach Adedeji. Now, the Daily Trust report was saying essentially that, look, whatever discrepancies that may have been noticed, that may have been alleged, do not appear in the certified true copies that the National Assembly has ordered to be released. Now, before now, we were all relying on the basis of the House version that was being quoted by the honorable member of House of Reps from Sokoto, that's Abdul Samad Dasuki. Now, on the basis of that, we all started saying the National Assembly should release its certified true copies in the spirit of transparency and accountability. And they've done that. And if you compare with the official Gazette, I did not notice any material defect. And I've checked the Daily Trust story. The Daily Trust story is saying, well, it looks like everything now is on the same page. the alleged altered versions and what was published in the official Gazette. So I think we waste unnecessary time and emotion still dealing with the issue of discrepancies. It is already law. June 26 was when 2 of those laws became effective. I think the intro was quoting June 29. That's not true. It's June 26 when President Tinubu assented to the 4 bills. And then 2 bills were, kept in abeyance for 6 months to allow for preparation. But the other part of my conversation with Dr. Adedeji was asking him, how ready is the Nigerian Revenue Service? And he says, well, they are ready in terms of technology, in terms of human capacity. But I was expressing doubts about, this digitization, technical capacity. And I was saying, I hope we will not be having glitches that will cause problems. Other issues I raised, basically all the controversies about bank narration, about, VAT, about, additional charges for people, the thresholds that were pointed out. And whether or not, this is all about protecting the poor for the benefit of the people. And he said very clearly that, look, this is in the interest for the benefit of the people also. That given the constraint of time, will seem to be the summary. So the true test, however, is in the implementation. And I raised questions about the MOU signed with France. And he says, it's about modernization, it's about digitization and all of that, and that they have similar agreements and treaties, whatever, with other countries. That is not only France. But I enjoin people to go and listen to that interview again and to listen with an open mind to be able to understand, the submissions by Dr. Adedeji. Now, the next thing is about Venezuela, which you raised. There are issues here. One, the issue of sovereignty and whether under international law, one country can go and invade the other and seize the president of that country. Article 2 of the UN Charter talks about equality of states. Article 7 says, you cannot just go and attack another country without cause. Article 51 says you can only do that when it is sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. And the United Nations Security Council is in fact going to meet on January 6th to consider whether it is legal or not. The other issue about legality has to do with the role of Congress. In the United States, yes, the argument that in 1989, when the United States engaged in the rendition of Manuel Noriega in a similar fashion, it was approved by Congress. But this time around, President Trump has disobeyed international law. He has disobeyed or he disregarded Congress, dismissing them as talkers, leakers, people who go and leak, and so he acted unilaterally. 3, the point has been well established that this is not about fentanyl or about drugs, as he has alleged, that President Maduro is leader of a circle of drug traffickers. However, it's about oil, as he himself has confessed. And as Julia Richardson, the former general commanding the Southern Command, has pointed out that this is about resources. This is about the threat of China in terms of trade. So these are the basic issues involved. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, will be arraigned in the New York court in Manhattan, I think this morning, and then they will be charged, of course, for weapons possessions, drug smuggling, conspiracy, and narco-terrorism. And then we'll begin to get the details. But, however, this has already caused a lot of concern, both in terms of what will happen to the energy market internationally, and also what the implications of this will be for international trade. Considering the fact that Venezuela has the largest crude oil reserve in the world, about 303 billion barrels of crude in terms of reserves. Even if since the 2000s, as a result of sanctions, Venezuela has only been able to provide just about 1% of global output. So Trump saying he's going to seize Venezuela oil and send Exet and Marco Rubio to oversee Venezuela, even to get that oil infrastructure working, it will take them years and billions of money, about $10 billion per annum. So this has put uncertainty, one, in the energy market and also in the political space in Venezuela, and we dare say in the whole of that affected region. Very quickly, as for Rivers, now Senator Bashiru is saying that, look, the party objects to Giadom saying Fubara is a so-called governor of Rivers State. There's no governor that is so-called. Every governor takes an oath of office, duly elected by the people. And even the chairman of the party, APC that is, Yetuada Netanwe, over the weekend issued a statement that the leader of the APC in Rivers, as far as the party is concerned, is Sim Fubara, who is a member of the APC and not any other person. And it was very clear that Nyesom Wike is not a member of the APC. That as far as they know, he belongs to the PDP. And that Sim Fubara is entitled to a second term as long as he wins at the primaries. And that every governor, sitting governor within their party, will have to go through that primaries. And there seems to be support coming from the top, from the spokesperson of the party and from the chairman of the party for Fubara. And that, I think, is a strong message to those who go about that Fubara is not 001 of Rivers State, is 001 of his ward. It is also a statement to them that in spite of their exertions, exuberant, youthful exertions, that they are being reminded that there is a limit to their enthusiasm. The people concerned know themselves. This is a very strong message from the APC party itself. And those who are intelligent enough should be able to understand the subtext of that intervention by the party on the side of Sim Fubara.
All right, let me start with the tax law and the controversies or the conversation around that. I thought that interview was very detailed with Dr. Zach Adedeji, and for avoidance of doubt, it would be good for you to watch that. I believe it's on our Arise News YouTube channel. It was aired yesterday on This Day Live with Dr. Abati, and you can watch the replay of that. However, in all of our sayings, I must say that this morning, I doubt that a number of people are convinced with some of the things that have been said. And I think it further describes the erosion of the trust of the people and the government. And the question has been asked around when this happens, or when we have a crisis of legitimacy in such an instance, it erodes the level of work that has been done on this joint tax bill. I say this because months of consultations were had, and Dr. Adedeji spoke about that. Mr. Taiwo Yedele has been here a number of times to talk about how widely they consulted with various stakeholders. There were a number of debates going back to rejig the law in order to ensure that all parties had a fair representation, especially when the northern region had, were not happy with the tax VAT distribution. Those issues were tackled, and finally seemed like we had gotten to a point where we were able to have a proper tax law that to some extent or to a large extent would work for the average Nigerian person. Following the accusations or the allegations made by Honorable Dasuki in the House of Representatives, then resurrected a new chain of challenges. Now, a few people have come out to speak. I remember that when Mr. Oyedele came here to the studio, he was unable to really speak authoritatively, because he himself had said he had not seen the harmonized copy of the bill as passed or as transmitted by the National Assembly. And that was, of course, cause for concern, even though he said he had seen a copy or he had known what was happening, but what he had was the unofficial document. Now, Dr. Adedeji has now confidently come out to say that it is what was passed, is what it was gazetted, and that's what would be implemented. There are still conversations around this. Then, if Honorable Dasuki raised that alarm in the National Assembly and it seemed or deemed to be false, then he also needs to come on the question, and I'm sure you'd agree. If he was able, because he who alleges must prove, if he has said it and he threw the whole nation, upended a tax law that had gained momentum, then he has questions to answer. Perhaps he needs to come out and share some of the, the evidence he has to throw Nigerians into this panic as to whether or not there was a tweaking or an adjustment or what was passed. I believe that in the spirit of fairness, both parties have spoken, but he who alleges must prove, just because of what it portends for building that trust between the people and the government, and the fact that when it comes to tax matters, it can be very sensitive. You're talking about people's hard-earned money. There are still gray areas around that, and so that still exists. Now, what the taxman must do, or what the government must do, already they've already started that. One of it was this engagement by Dr. Adedeji. He hasn't spoken a lot around this. Mr. Oyedele has led the charge many times, and you can understand why. He was the chairman of the committee. But I believe that a lot more information, as we have called consistently for, has to go out. And people need to find information from the right sources, not from social media banter, not from social media propagandists, but people who have the correct information around this. And in order for us to do that, Nigerians need to see certified true copies or true actual documents, not reported speech. I think that's very important. People must understand. Then how the tax affects them. There's still a lot of conversations or opaqueness or shall I say uncertainties for a number of the everyday Nigerians as to how this tax affects them, because again of the misinformation that happened in the timeline in between. I believe that the tax office, Nigerian Revenue Service, should take the lead on this by ensuring that information is put out there consistently and in different formats that everybody, different people can understand. Different languages that appeals to different cultures, that appeals to different sensibilities. This is the onus of the Nigerian government to ensure that everyone is carried along, and in a way, especially because it affects every single person. And so those are some of the things I would mention this morning, because it still hangs in the air. It's a good thing that Dr. Adedeji spoke spoke authoritatively. He was very confident in his responses yesterday in that interview. But I do feel that Honorable Dasuki owes the Nigerian people, after making such a grave allegation, to justify what he said, so that we know that what we have on ground years down the line, we're not questioning or nothing else comes up out of that. Beyond that, one other thing where they say, is protecting the poor, and evidence of the fact that people don't see it that way is that NANS is still going on. They've called for a strike action on the 14th of January next week, to protest the fact that the tax law does not benefit the most vulnerable. That needs to be addressed as well. Why are there uncertainties around, and people are jittery about its effect and impact on their livelihood? This needs to be addressed, and in very clear terms. Engagements, because you don't need that kind of distraction, particularly when the president has said it's a monumental shift and could be, pave way for Nigeria to generate revenue and to protect the most vulnerable in society. Now, moving on away from that, let me touch on insecurity. The president has talked tough, even though, like I mentioned earlier on, he's talking tough from abroad. And a number of people right from the time had criticized, or at least had something to say about the fact that at such a critical time in our nation, he's not in the country. Like I mentioned earlier, he's entitled to go on leave. Every worker deserves a break. But at a point in time where there are a number of issues around insecurity, perhaps some people might argue that this is a time to be at home, to stay at home, and actually, as the commander-in-chief, really take charge of what's going on. We saw what's happened now in Niger State, and unfortunately, we've heard and read statements like this from commanders-in-chief, not just President Tinubu, but even previous leaders. But what Nigerians want to move away from is announcements and the right language to the right actions, that we will see an end to brazen acts of terrorism like this, where a large number of people would be carted away. This is what Nigerians are asking, and they're saying it's not rocket science. Straight after that, we took the story of Katsina State, and I must give kudos to security operatives who are working assiduously to ensure that they're able to defeat terrorism. But unfortunately, for it to have lasted this long, the Nigerian people are saying it's not enough, and people do not feel safe currently under this administration. And that's one area that must be faced even as we look ahead to the next elections in 2027. I already talked about the politicking in Rivers State and in other parts of the country. Politics is head on in politics. Now with Maduro, I'll just say this very quickly. We have Adefemi coming up next, and she will break this story down. It has been trending. It has been the number one topic. But the winners and losers. Number one, of course, the United States has emerged perhaps the greatest winner. But one thing that was clear is the immense power, executive power that the President of the United States has. This has demonstrated that. We often talk about the Nigerian presidency as a monarchy, but we can now see that what has happened in the United States is that previous presidents have not just exercised the excessive power, reach of the extent of their power in instances like this. Beyond that also is that would we see a return of Maria Machado, the current UN peace, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, or the latest one. The other thing is, of course, has been talked about the potential access to oil by the United States of America. So a number of things we'll be talking about, and the losers later on when Adefemi comes to join us very shortly.